The office was quiet save for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Gunner sat behind his desk, his remaining eye trained on the paperwork in front of him, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on the battles that had been fought and the ones still to come. The silence was broken by the sound of footsteps and the door creaking open. Derren strolled in, casual as always, wearing that ever-present smirk that Gunner had grown used to over the years. Without waiting for an invitation, Derren hopped up to sit on the edge of Gunner's desk, grinning like he had a secret. "You busy, boss man?" Derren asked, kicking his legs slightly as he leaned in closer. Gunner glanced up, one eyebrow raised. "I'm guessing you've got something on your mind, Derren. What is it this time?" Derren's smirk widened. "You remember any of the pre-deployment training we did at the National Training Center? NTC? Or how about JRTC? Gunner leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yeah, the war games. Those were some good times." Derren nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. War games. I was just talking with my old buddy, Sergeant Major Kick. He's still running things at the training facilities. We got to reminiscing, and it got me thinking." Gunner narrowed his eye, sensing what was coming. "I'm listening." Derren straightened, his grin taking on a competitive edge. "How about a good old-fashioned war game? Just like the old days. My team versus yours. We've been sitting on our hands too long. It's time to shake the dust off." Gunner chuckled, shaking his head. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Derren replied, hopping off the desk. 7 days of all-out war games at NTC, with our teams going head-to-head. We've got the supernatural twist this time, of course, but the basics are the same." Gunner folded his arms across his chest, studying Derren carefully. "And what's the point of this challenge?" Derren shrugged, but there was a spark in his eyes. "Prove you're still the top dog, Gunner. You, me, and our teams. No holding back. Just like we used to do." There was a long pause as Gunner considered the proposal. The old days of training had been intense, physically and mentally, and while he had always been the leader, the idea of going head-to-head with Derren, a man who knew how to get under his skin, sparked something inside him. "All right," Gunner finally said, leaning forward. "You've got yourself a war game, but don't think for a second that I'm going to make it easy for you." Derren's grin widened. Wouldn't have it any other way. He clapped his hands together, clearly thrilled that Gunner had taken the bait. "So, here's the deal. We start in 1 week, 7 days of war games at NTC. I'm taking Eli, Clora, and Omega on my team. I don't think that Wolf likes me much, but we'll figure it out. Ileana's going to be our referee, keep things fair, and Jules there for medical support, just in case someone decides to get a little too competitive." Gunner raised an eyebrow. "And my team?" "You've got Alpha, Beta, and you can choose 2 others from the pack, but pick wisely. I'm not planning to go easy on you." Gunner smiled, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Don't worry about me, Derren. I'll pick the best." Derren paced back and forth in front of the desk, his mind already racing ahead. "Oh, and one more thing. Sergeant Major Kick's going to make sure we've got the latest training gear. You'll get your kit tomorrow. Energy-based weapons that fire non-lethal rounds, but trust me, they hurt like hell when you're hit." Gunner stood, the air between them charged with a new kind of intensity. "I hope you're ready to lose, Derren." Derren just laughed. "I think you're the one who needs to prepare for that." As he turned to leave the room, Derren paused at the door, throwing one last challenge over his shoulder. "Game starts on Monday. Get your team ready, Gunner. You've got 7 days." The team prepares. Later that day, Gunner stood before his chosen team in the main room of the workshop. Alpha and Beta, his 2 loyal wolves, sat at his feet, their golden eyes fixed on him. Desera leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, while Karina stood beside her, ready and focused. "We've got 1 week before we head to NTC for war games," Gunner began, his voice steady. "Derren's going to hit us hard, and I need each of you at your best. This isn't just a training exercise. It's a test. Derren smirked, cracking her knuckles. Derren's team might be tough, but they've got nothing on us. Karina nodded, already thinking tactically. What's the plan, Gunner? We start with team-building drills, Gunner explained. Then we'll focus on offensive and defensive strategies. Derren's team is strong. Eli's got the tech advantage. Clora's got tactics. And Omega. We can't underestimate them. Derren straightened up. You think we've got a shot? Gunner's gaze hardened. We're not just fighting for bragging rights. Derren challenged us because he thinks he can outsmart us. I'm not letting that happen. He looked down at Alpha and Beta. The wolves had been through countless battles by his side, and he trusted them more than anyone. They wouldn't let him down. We've got 1 week to get ready, Gunner said. Let's make it count. Derren's team. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Derren gathered his own team at a remote location in the countryside. Eli, Clora, and Omega stood before him as the wind whipped through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and foliage. We've got 1 week to train, Derren said, his voice all business now. Gunner's going to come at us with everything he's got, and we need to be ready. Clora nodded, her tactical mind already working. What's the plan? Eli, I need you working on the tech, surveillance, comms, anything that can give us an edge. Clora, you're handling strategy. I want us outsmarting Gunner at every turn. Eli gave a determined nod. Got it! And Omega, Derren added, turning to the massive wolf standing beside Clora. You and I need to work on communication. I need to make sure we're on the same page. Omega growled softly and Clora chuckled. He'll be fine, as long as you don't do anything stupid. Derren grinned. No promises. The team got to work, training hard and pushing themselves to the limit. They knew that when the time came, Gunner's team would bring everything they had. But Derren was confident in his team's ability to rise to the challenge. The countdown begins. As the week passed, both teams trained relentlessly. They knew that the upcoming war games wouldn't be just a test of strength, but of strategy, coordination, and trust. The day before the game, Gunner received the operations order. The details of the war game were laid out clearly: rules, objectives, and the boundaries of the training area. As he read through the document, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Derren had gone all out on this one. Monday morning would bring the start of something neither team would forget, a test of skill, loyalty, and willpower. And when it was over, only one team would stand victorious. As the final hours ticked by, the air was filled with anticipation. Both teams were ready. The stage was set. Let the games begin. The air in the hangar was filled with the low hum of machinery and the distant echo of voices. Derren led his team toward the far end of the cavernous space, a mischievous grin plastered on his face as he gestured for Eli, Clora, and Omega to follow. The hangar lights glinted off the sleek black C-130 cargo plane parked near the entrance, but that wasn't the only thing that caught the team's attention. All right, team, I've got something special to show you before we head out, Derren said, his voice carrying a note of excitement. Eli raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What did you do, Derren? With a flourish, Derren threw open the doors to a side hangar, revealing a vehicle unlike anything they had seen before. Sitting in the center of the room was a UTV, a hybrid machine that gleamed under the lights. It looked like a cross between a futuristic war machine and something out of a cartoon, complete with exaggerated wolf ears on the roof and a large tail mounted at the back. But the real show was in the details. The UTV was a hybrid model, capable of switching between electric and gas-powered modes, and it seated 3, a driver and a passenger in the front, with a third seat mounted in the middle for a gunner. The passenger side was equipped with a mounted machine gun, rigged with a training receiver that would fire non-lethal energy rounds for the upcoming war games. And at the back, the gunner's turret featured a minigun capable of spitting out 1,000 training rounds per minute. On either side of the turret, bench seats were securely fastened, clearly designed for Omega and the wolves to ride in. The vehicle looked like a beast designed for combat, and yet Derren couldn't resist his personal touch. Those wolf ears and tail stood out in comical contrast to the rest of the machine. "I present to you," Derren said dramatically, "the new and improved Wolfmobile." Eli blinked, trying to process what she was seeing. "You really went all out, didn't you?" Clora crossed her arms, a slight smirk forming on her lips as she inspected the machine. "I'm not sure whether to be impressed or worried." Derren grinned proudly. "Impressed, definitely. This bad boy is a hybrid, runs on both electric and gas, so we're good on speed and silence, perfect for getting in and out without drawing too much attention. And, of course, the turret and machine gun are equipped with the training receivers so we can light up the battlefield without taking out the other team. Unfortunately." Omega padded forward and sniffed at the bench seats on either side of the turret. He let out a soft growl, his golden eyes narrowing as if evaluating the contraption. Derren knelt down beside the wolf, patting one of the benches. "Don't worry, big guy, these are secure. You'll be riding in style. I made sure of it." Clora gave Derren an appraising look. "All right, you've outdone yourself this time. But are you sure this thing will handle the terrain at NTC?" Derren stood up, his grin never faltering. "Oh, it'll handle anything NTC throws at us. Trust me. We'll be moving like shadows. Well, shadows with a lot of firepower." Eli walked around the vehicle, inspecting the mounted guns and the turret. "And the machine guns? Non-lethal?" Derren nodded. "All energy-based rounds, so they'll sting like hell, but nobody's dying on my watch. It's all about the pain without the permanence." Eli raised an eyebrow, giving him a sideways look. "You really thought this through?" Derren gave a mock bow. "I try." Just as the group started to admire the Wolfmobile from different angles, Derren turned to the large black C-130 cargo plane, parked nearby. The sleek matte black aircraft loomed over them, its engines silent, but filled with the promise of power. "And that, my friends, is our ride to NTC," Derren announced, motioning to the aircraft. "Got in touch with some old friends and borrowed this beauty. We'll be making a tactical insertion once we get to NTC." "Tactical insertion?" Clora asked, a note of skepticism in her voice. "You mean—" Derren's grin grew wider. "That's right, a good old-fashioned parachute drop. We'll be flying in low and jumping out before dawn. Perfect way to make an entrance, don't you think?" Omega growled softly, pacing around the Wolfmobile as if sensing the coming challenge. Clora exchanged a glance with the massive wolf, her lips curving into a smile. "Omega and I have done worse." Eli crossed her arms, her brow furrowed in thought. "And the gear?" "Already packed," Derren replied. "Everything we need for the week is loaded in the plane, including the training kit. You'll get the operational order tonight and we hit the ground running at dawn." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the team. "So, who's scared of heights? 'Cause if you are, now's the time to speak up." Eli, always composed, rolled her eyes. "You know heights don't bother me." Clora cracked her knuckles, stepping forward. "Neither of us have a problem with heights, Derren." Derren smirked. "Good. Just wanted to make sure everyone's ready to fly. 'Cause when that door opens tomorrow, we're jumping out at 1,200 feet, and there's no going back." The atmosphere in the hangar shifted, the playful banter giving way to a sharper focus. Everyone understood that the war games would push them to their limits, physically, mentally, and strategically. This wasn't just about training, it was about testing their cohesion as a unit, their ability to adapt and survive under pressure. Eli glanced at the C-130, then at the Wolfmobile. "Derren, you've certainly raised the stakes." Derren laughed. "That's the idea. This is gonna be fun." Clora, always the pragmatic one, leaned against the vehicle, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Fun? Maybe, but I'm more interested in winning." "We will," Derren said confidently. "I've got a plan, and with this setup, Gunner's not going to know what hit him." Omega growled in agreement, and for a moment, the group shared a rare, unified smile. The final countdown. Later that evening, as the team gathered for final preparations, Derren handed out the operational orders. The plan was simple but tactical. They'd parachute into NTC under cover of darkness and head straight for their starting point in the war games. Gunner's team would be doing the same, but Derren had a few surprises up his sleeve. Chief among them, the Wolfmobile, and the unspoken advantages it provided in terms of mobility and firepower. As Derren briefed the team, Eli's mind raced with calculations about the tech she'd rig up to give them an edge, while Clora went over potential strategies, mentally mapping the terrain they'd be navigating. The anticipation was palpable. Tomorrow they'd take to the skies, drop into enemy territory, and engage in a week of battle where every decision could be the difference between victory and defeat. The anticipation buzzed through the air like electricity as Derren gathered his team in the dimly lit hangar, the low hum of the C-130's engines reverberating through the walls. It wasn't just any war game, it was a showdown of pride, honor, and bragging rights. This wasn't about life or death, but something deeper, something personal. Derren, leaning casually against the rugged frame of the Wolfmobile, grinned at his team. "All right, everyone, who's afraid of heights?" He raised an eyebrow, his smirk teasing. Eli, standing at his side, looked up at the towering plane before them. Her face was serious, her sharp eyes taking in the strange, mechanical bird with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "I've spent most of my life in the forests and open plains of Alfheim. This," she gestured toward the plane, "isn't natural." Derren chuckled, his voice light. "Don't worry, Keebler. By the time you hit the ground, you'll think it's the most exhilarating thing ever." Clora, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, threw a playful jab. "That is, if you don't puke mid-air." Eli shot Clora a sharp look, her elven pride refusing to show weakness. "I've faced worse than falling from the sky. Just explain how this works." Derren stood straighter, giving the black C-130 a fond look. "This bird is how we're getting into the game. We'll be making a tactical parachute insertion. You've got your parachutes, harnesses, and," he pointed toward Omega, pacing in the background, his fur bristling. "Even the wolves have their own setup." Eli frowned as she glanced at Omega. The large, half-dire, half-grey wolf seemed uneasy, growling low at the sound of the engines. "He's not going to like this." "Relax," Derren said, waving it off. "Omega's tough. Once he's in the air, he'll love it." Omega growled again, but Eli wasn't convinced. She knelt next to him, calming him with a gentle hand. "Easy now. We'll be fine." The jump. Tactical parachuting. The C-130 roared down the runway and took to the skies, climbing higher and higher into the thin air. Inside, Derren's team strapped themselves in, the anticipation building as the mission briefing played in their minds. Eli sat rigid, her eyes darting toward the cargo door that would soon open to drop them into the desert below. The hum of the plane was unsettling, the confined space foreign to her elven instincts. Clora, already suited up, smirked from across the cabin. "You ready to fly, Keebler?" Eli narrowed her eyes, her hands tightening on the straps of her harness. "Ready as I'll ever be." The red light over the door blinked on, a signal that they were approaching the drop zone. Derren stood up, adjusting his own chute, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "All right, team. Let's make this count." The jump door hissed open, revealing the vast desert landscape far below. The wind rushed inside, howling as it filled the cabin. Omega's ears flattened against his head, clearly agitated by the sudden rush of air. His wolfish instincts were fighting against the unnatural situation, but Derren had equipped him with a specially designed harness, one he'd tested himself. Derren gave Omega a quick scratch behind the ears. "Ready, boy? This is going to be wild." The green light blinked on, signaling the go. Derren didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gear, strapped Omega securely beside him, and jumped. The others followed. Clora was next, leaping effortlessly into the sky, her battle-hardened face showing no fear. "Race you down!" she yelled into the wind. Eli, heart pounding in her chest, stepped up to the edge. She hesitated for only a second, taking in the wide open sky. This was completely unlike anything she had ever experienced, but she wasn't about to let her pride be questioned. With a steadying breath, she leaped into the void. The sensation of free-falling through the sky was jarring at first, an alien experience to an elf who was used to running on solid ground or navigating the treetops of Alfheim. But after a few seconds, Eli adjusted, focusing on her landing point. The ground rushed up to meet them, and her parachute deployed smoothly. She landed lightly, her elven agility aiding her in sticking the landing. Clora hit the ground beside her, giving her a quick smirk. "Not bad for your first time." Eli straightened up, brushing off her jump. "Not bad for an Earthborn." Derren touched down next, landing with Omega, who shook off the experience with a growl of discontent. "Told you it was fun," Derren said with a grin as he checked Omega's gear. The Wolfmobile dropped nearby, landing with a mechanical thud as its parachutes deployed. Derren wasted no time getting his team geared up and loaded onto the vehicle. Eli took the front passenger seat, where the mounted energy-firing machine gun gleamed, while Clora climbed into the turret, her hands resting on the grips of the minigun. Derren revved the engine. "Everyone ready? Let's show Gunner's team what real speed looks like." With a roar, the Wolfmobile surged forward, kicking up dust as they sped toward the objective, Gunner's insertion and delays. Across the desert, Gunner and his team soared through the skies in the black jet. Sleek and fast, it carved through the air like a shadow. Inside, Gunner was focused, his eyes on the mission ahead. They were up against Derren's team, and while it was all in good fun, the competitive fire burned in his chest. Karina sat across from him, checking her blades. "Derren's probably already on the ground, setting up his traps." "We'll see about that," Gunner replied. "He won't have the advantage for long." Desiree adjusted her gear, looking at the electric dirt bikes stowed behind them. "The bikes will get us there fast, but the wolves, they'll slow us down." "They'll manage," Gunner said, glancing at Alpha and Beta, who were pacing restlessly in the back. "They've kept pace before." The jet banked smoothly, descending toward the insertion point. When the ramp opened, the air outside rushed in, hot and dry. Gunner led the team out, dismounting the jet and unloading the electric bikes. They mounted the bikes and tore off across the desert, the smooth hum of the electric engines barely audible over the wind. Alpha and Beta sprinted beside them, their powerful legs keeping up for the first few miles. But as the terrain grew rougher, the wolves began to tire, forcing Gunner's team to slow down. Desiree cursed under her breath. "Derren's already ahead of us." "Keep moving," Gunner growled. "We'll catch him." But the delay was clear. They were falling behind, and they all knew it. The ambush. Derren's trap. Derren's team arrived at the outpost far ahead of schedule, parking the Wolfmobile in a concealed position near the ridge. Derren surveyed the area, his mind working through their tactical options. "All right, Eli, get the traps ready. Clora, find a high point to cover the field. We'll hit Gunner's team the moment they enter the ravine." Eli moved quickly, setting up a series of energy snares, trip mines, and holographic decoys that would confuse and disorient Gunner's team. Clora climbed the ridge, positioning herself behind the turret of the Wolfmobile, her finger twitching on the trigger. "Gunner's gonna regret challenging us," Derren muttered to himself, grinning as he took up position. Gunner's arrival, the fight begins. Hours later, Gunner's team reached the ravine, moving cautiously. There was a tension in the air, the kind that only came before an ambush. "Something's not right," Gunner muttered, slowing his bike. "Stay alert." As they entered the ravine, Derren's trap was sprung. The Wolfmobile's turret roared to life, spewing energy rounds that tore into the rocky terrain. Ashley barely had time to react before a barrage of shots hit her vest, signaling her elimination. "Down!" Gunner barked as the team scrambled for cover. Alpha and Beta were quick to respond, but they couldn't avoid the concentrated fire. Beta's vest lit up next, signaling his defeat. "Beta's out!" Desiree called, diving behind a rock. Keep moving, Gunner ordered, his mind racing for a way out. But Derren's team had the high ground and the advantage. Karina tried to slip through the shadows, blades drawn as she stalked toward Derren. She moved silently, but Derren was ready. Really, Karina? A knife? You brought a knife to a gunfight? Before she could react, one of Eli's traps went off, disorienting her. Her vest flared and she was out. The wolves' battle, Alpha versus Omega. Nearby, Alpha and Omega squared off in a brutal battle. The two wolves clashed with snarls and growls, each trying to assert dominance. Omega, faster and more agile, danced around Alpha's brute force, but Alpha's experience gave him the edge. In the end, after a long, fierce battle, Omega submitted to his father, acknowledging Alpha's superiority. Desera's shot, and the final showdown. Desera, ever the sniper, took advantage of the chaos. From her concealed position, she lined up her shot, taking aim at Derren. With one well-placed shot, she hit him square in the chest, knocking him out of the fight. Nice shot, Gunner muttered as he slid into cover beside her. But Eli wasn't done yet. Using one of her gadgets, she projected a holographic decoy of herself, confusing Desera. While Desera focused on the illusion, Eli moved in from behind, taking the sniper out in a surprise counterattack. "Eliana, call it!" Eli shouted, knowing she had been hit at the same time as Desera. Eliana's voice crackled over the comms. "Both Eli and Desera are out." The final face-off, Gunner versus Clora. With most of the teams eliminated, it came down to Gunner and Clora. The two alphas, both tactical geniuses in their own right, squared off across the battlefield. Clora knew she couldn't match Gunner's brute strength, so she relied on her speed and agility, darting in and out of cover, hitting him with quick, precise shots before disappearing into the shadows. But Gunner wasn't about to go down easily. He pushed forward, muscling through her attacks, absorbing the hits while closing the distance between them. Clora circled around, trying to get the upper hand, but Gunner was relentless. Finally, with a well-timed maneuver, he caught her off guard, firing a final shot that hit her vest square in the back. "Eliana?" Gunner called out, breathing heavily. "Gunner wins!" Eliana declared, her voice echoing through the ravine. Aftermath, joking and debriefing, both teams regrouped at the outpost, laughing and trading jabs about the fight. Clora gave Gunner a playful shove. "Next time, old man." Derren, despite being eliminated early, couldn't help but grin. Okay, I'll admit the Wolfmobile gave us an unfair advantage. But hey, it's still impressive, right?" Gunner shook his head with a smirk. "I'll give you that much. The Wolfmobile was something else." As the banter continued, it was clear the war game had been a success, even if only one team could claim victory.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.